So let's welcome Mr. Larry Bachus.
¿Todo bien? ¿Escucha bien? Can everybody hear?
Sí, sí.
Okay. My name is Larry Bachus, and I was here and graduated in 1974. I've been through about 6 incarnations, 6 professions, 6 times changing jobs. I think they say that many people will change their job more than once. Not too many people do the same thing for 50 years. So I've jumped around a little bit. Whenever you see red type, it's an event that probably would not have happened had it not been for the second language. And maybe hold your questions and make a note of the frame number or something like that. And if there's a question, I'll answer a question later. We can discuss it later. And having lunch today, Dr. Julian said, pero que tiene que decir algo en español. Yo sí hablo español y he tenido la oportunidad de viajar a muchos países en el mundo con mi idioma y enseño cursos de ingeniería a ingenieros de mantenimiento y confiabilidad. That's what I do now. But I'll go back into English because the language of this room is in English, I think. I perceive, this is, when you see blue text, it's an opinion. Blue. I perceive that our society idolizes the wrong professions and the wrong people. What does an actor do? An actor is someone who can pretend to be someone else. Is it really worth so much attention and scandal from the masses? Actors, singers, musicians, politicians, talking heads on TV get award shows and accolades like DMAs, Grammys, Tonys, CMAs, Oscars, etc., and all kinds of recognition simply because they can act, or they are contortionists, or they are the child of some notable person, or because they can hold a musical note for 8 bars, or they had sex on camera for all to see. All the while, there are people who really contribute to society and humanity. Doctors Without Borders, teachers, firefighters, nurses, EMT technicians, civil rights attorneys, wrongful imprisonment advocates, equal pay for women advocates, and more. And most of these people will retire and die in obscurity with no recognition. So this presentation is about a UAB professor who was present 50 years ago when the Foreign Language Department was commissioned at UAB and how the professor influenced my career. My name is Larry Bachus. I might be the first second language Spanish major at UAB. There were other people in my class. I remember other people in my class. If I'm the first, it's because my last name begins with B. And they made better grades than me. I'm the product of a Birmingham working class family and a public school system who received encouragement and a helping hand from my teachers who did not give up on me. My mother's family is from 5 Points West in Birmingham. My father's family was from Norwood, another suburb of Birmingham. I started high school at West End Elementary. I tended to talk in school. I know I was testing the patience of my teachers. And my 3rd grade teacher sparked my interest in science, invention, math, and all things mechanical. And my 5th grade teacher put me on the track to my first career. That was as a radio announcer, broadcasting. I graduated from high school in 1967, and I was awarded a scholarship for chemistry. So I thought I was going to be a pharmacist or a chemist. But the Vietnam War interrupted my first year in college. So I joined the Navy and spent 4 years in the Navy, and that's me there, right here and over there on the other side. I became intrigued with a second language while I was in the Navy. I was on a team of 4 people, a Puerto Rican, a Chicano, a Filipino, and me. And they all spoke another language. They all had a common language when they were together. And I did not participate in that language. I did not participate in what they were talking about because I was just a gringo. And I really was not raised around another language or the fact that other people do speak other languages in other countries. My military experience ended in 1971. The Navy took 4 years out of my life, so when I went back to school, UAB, I was 4 years older than everybody else. And UAB admitted me as a transient student, not even a full student, just, it's kind of like auditing a course, I guess. I didn't have a designated major or minor, just to pay the tuition and sit in class and about it. Tuition was paid by the GI Bill. That's one thing I got out of the military. And I had a part-time position at a news department in the local radio station. And my goal was to graduate ASAP, as soon as possible, because I was 4 years older than everybody else. And I just wanted to get out and start my career. I studied courses in anthropology, sociology, math, business, Spanish, composition, and economics. Just taking a variety of courses just to see what would call my interest. The initial Spanish professors were Dr. Dolores Ceballos and Dr. Gaston Jones. Now, I'm going to call him Jones, but his name is Jones. Jones. He was a Cuban of English extraction. His descendants had arrived in Cuba from England, I believe. And so his name was Jones, if you see it spelled, but in Cuba he was called Jones. And I joined the Círculo Español. That was a UAB Spanish club at the time. And I became an officer and eventually the president of the club. And as the president of El Círculo Español, we had lots of sangria, native food, exchange students and music, combined English and the Spanish clubs on campus. And there's one of the gatherings right there. And that was me in 1973. Loud shirts. And there's Dr. Jones and me and another one of the parties. And this was the faculty advisor at the time, Dr. Gaston Jones. Easy person to know. His home was always open to help and counsel the students, offer a Cuban coffee, maybe a Cuban cigar, listen to some Caribbean music, and one rule, we had to speak Spanish when we were in his home. Graduated in 1974, so I started in 72, the year that the language department was founded, or the year that language was offering a major, and graduated in 74 because I was taking what they call more than a full load and even going to school in the summertime. Like I said, my goal was to get out as soon as possible, go ahead and graduate as soon as possible. So I really did a 4-year curriculum in 2 years. And this is, and here we go with the red text. Radio station in El Paso said, well, you work at a radio station in Birmingham? Would you like to come out to El Paso and you're bilingual? Would you like to come out to El Paso and do bilingual radio in El Paso, Texas? So I said yes. And that was a radio station, KINT. We call it Kent 98. Of course, the INT was international. There was English radio in El Paso and Spanish radio in Ciudad Juarez. There was no bilingual radio on the border until 1974 when KINT did the airwaves. Well, I was interviewing some matadors for Bull Stadium down in Ciudad Juarez and walked out into the center of the bull ring and they clipped that picture of me there. And the following Sunday, that was the spectacle of the bull ring in Ciudad Juarez. 1098 broadcast in English. We gathered and reported the news in English in El Paso, and we reported politics and crime on both sides of the border. We gathered the news and interviewed the newsmakers in Spanish in Ciudad Juarez. Now, crime in Ciudad Juarez eventually spills over into El Paso, so that's why it's important. Food shortages, unemployment, price hikes in Ciudad Juarez may not be important in El Paso, but these issues are important to the aunts and the uncles and the cousins and other relatives and friends of the citizens of El Paso. Because of the work that we were doing, well, they put me into the mayor's limousine and drove me down to Ciudad Juarez and made me a distinguished visitor of the city of Ciudad Juarez. And as I turned in my resignation later, I was made an honorary citizen of the city of El Paso for the work that we were doing out there. And then it was back to Birmingham for some more radio and to pursue radio news in Tennessee and eventually the ABC radio network in New York. And somebody in this room said to me, "Larry, have I ever seen you in a suit?" Yes, those were my suit days. The guy on the left there. In 1978, the UAB newspaper, The Kaleidoscope, did a piece called The Practical Degree. And that's me being interviewed there in search of the practical degree. And you can see where it mentions, let me take the pointer here, UAB and the radio station, WSBN, and KINT, and the ABC radio network. And that was the practical degree. Bachus is quick to point out that a degree in a certain subject can be very deceptive to prospective employers, and oftentimes to the student himself, and even to me. I really was not aware of what was about to happen. Back then it was kind of taking me by storm and to get a job offer because I was bilingual, because I had a good professor actually. Looking back, Bachus recalled his education that he received at UAB as a real factor in his abilities to make a career for himself. He said both Doctors Juanes and Richmond Brown of the Mass Communications Department contributed to his practical education. And I remember Dr. Lee, and you were there. Yeah, and you were there. Slightly later. Yeah, okay, I remember. And then from Memphis to New York City, and I went to work for ABC, the network. I was 29 years old, and when the management at ABC Radio learned that I could speak Spanish, they made me a correspondent in Latin America. And I traveled Latin America, chased hurricanes, volcanoes, military coups, dictatorships, drug busts, wars, invasions, earthquakes, aviation disasters, and if anybody remembers the James Jones Kool-Aid party in Guyana, I was there. Coming back through Miami, now Dr. Juanes now was retired and living in Miami, and so I would make my airplane schedule so that I could stop in Miami, and I would go over to his house, and we'd spend the evening together, and I'd take him out to dinner. And then I'd get on the airplane the next day, and that was me back then. What the hell happened? There's the sunset on the Orinoco River, and a thunderstorm lightning strike on Lake Titicaca in Bolivia, and Machu Picchu in Peru. And to get being paid to go to these places I thought that was pretty good. An industrial production contract led to a position with a manufacturer of industrial spare and replacement parts. Here we go with the red text. For the second language, I was assigned as the district manager and eventually senior manager in Latin America. This is my business phase. I left broadcasting. I was responsible for more than 45 distributorships and 750 employees. Is it possible I can get a little sip of water? Yes. Thank you. While passing back through Miami, here's Dr. Juanes again. His backyard was a garden, and so we would always hang out, and I would time my flights so that I could go spend the afternoon with him. And started my company in 1987, so I said, I'm going to work for myself. I'm not going to work for somebody else. Observing a need in industry, I developed a tool called the ORID, O-R-I-D. The ORID is an acronym. The word is an acronym. Thank you. It means O-Ring Identifying Device, O-R-I-D. And the ORID has been very good to me. It was patented in 1988. It proved commercially successful. That's a brochure with my hand on it. My own company, red text. My education at UAB, Spanish and economics, proved useful to export and market the orange. And here's another, I don't like that. Here's another piece of literature. You can see there are distributors in Spain and Colombia and Puerto Rico. So I would visit these places speaking Spanish and work with their salespeople and do my work there in Spanish, and then to the other places in English. And that was how to order the orange if you wanted it. And here it is in Korean. And my red text, education at UAB, Spanish and business proved useful to locate parts and suppliers in Latin America to keep prices competitive. And here's the same announcement basically in Spanish from the distributor in Spain of the O-ring identifier tool. The O-ring, it's a tool. It's nothing that you would have in your house, not like pliers or screwdriver or anything. But if you work in heavy industry, pneumatics, hydraulics, fluid control, fluid handling, pumps, compressors, and such, it's popular in professional mechanics. Being able to write press releases, something that I learned at UAB. So here's an article that I wrote, and there's another article, Exercising the O-Ring Demons. And this was the Society of Pharmaceutical and Medical Device Professionals. And the ORID also proved useful in aviation. A 747 jetliner has something like 40,000 rubber seals on it. And NASA and the Army and Boeing and American Airlines and Delta, they all buy that tool from me. In 1974, developed and perfected another product, the turbo tank, with the Puerto Rican chemical industry, red text. The turbo tank became registered and trademarked in 1995. All right, back through Miami, and maybe you notice some gray hair starting to show here and here. Getting old. UAB education in writing and journalism aided the promotion of the turbo tank. There's a piece of literature right there. Press releases, articles about the turbo tank in different magazines. This magazine, Pumps and Systems, I believe, is published right here in Birmingham by ABBA Media. And in one of our visits, Gaston confessed that there were some things that he still wanted to say. So he sat down and he published a book of short stories. Y para qué vinieron? Why did they come? That was one of his books of short. That was his book of short stories. And then he did a science fiction novel, White Eternity, and it would compare to anything you might see, Star Wars or Star Trek. It was a very good book. In his final years, Gaston enjoyed celebrity and fame in the Miami and South Florida literary circles, especially in the Cuban exile community. Once again, Gaston, my professor at 88 years of age, taught me that there were still some other roads to travel. His inspiration led me to write an article that eventually resulted in a magazine column as the pump guy. So I'm the pump guy. Once again, I'm thankful for my UAB education and with Professor Jones. The Pump Guy column ran for 10 years in 6 different technical magazines around the globe. Energy Tech magazine, that was US, flow control, chemical processing in the US. World Pumps covered Europe and UK and India. And in red text, Industria 360, in Spanish and Central America and the Caribbean. And then mechanical technology in Africa and the Middle East. I kind of had a global magazine column. And this is Energy Tech. You can see the type things that they would write about. And here's the Pump Guy articles and World Pumps. And this was the magazine in Spanish with the article in Spanish. And there you go. That was one of my favorite articles. At least I didn't throw up. The Pump Guy mixed humor, facts, satire, shame, verbal jabs, and some truth to shape U.S. and global energy policy. And in 2009, the ASBE, that's the American Society of Business Publication Editors, gave a gold award to the magazine that I was working for because of the regular column, The Punk Guy by Larry Bachus. In 2004, the Birmingham News interviewed me on an article about UAB immigration and the global economy. That was the article right there. And quotes, Spanish definitely helped me, said Bachus. I'm a living witness to that. Spanish has come back to benefit me in my career time and time again. I tell all the people that no matter what you do, combine it with the knowledge of a foreign language. You'll be better, you'll be a better doctor, you will be a better biology, you'll be a better artist. You can do your work in another language. And I had the opportunity to honor my old Spanish professor in one of my articles, a few of my articles actually. So I took his advice and I wrote a book. It was published by Elsevier Science. Elsevier Science is kind of like McGraw-Hill of Europe. And a book in Spanish about industrial pumps. And as an author and a technical book, author of technical books, I was invited, read text to speak and train maintenance and reliability professionals in the United States and around the globe. But here's a thing that I did at the University of Wisconsin 3 times, Graduate School of Engineering, short course, continuing education. And there's the brochure of the course talking about me right there. And this was one of my lectures in Houston. And there's a room filled with people. And Jamaica, you can see me right there. I'm wearing the same clothes. And down in the Caribbean, Trinidad, right there. And the ISA, the International Society of Automation and Instrumentation, this announcement's in Spanish. And this was one of my lectures in Medellin, Colombia. There are 30 chairs, 30 chairs, 30 chairs, and 30 chairs. The room had 120 people to attend that lecture. That's the same room filled. And here's a smaller lecture in Nicaragua and Cartagena, Colombia. We're in the same clothes again. In Colima, Mexico. That was a tour of some 4 or 5 cities in Mexico. And then I connected with this company right here, International Business Conferences. It's a large business conference presented in the UK and India. And this company sent me to India 3 times. But I don't speak their language over there. And they said, yeah, but you know how to do those things. So that's my education and things that I learned here at UAB. So they would send me 3 times to Mumbai, Chennai, and Delhi on 3 different occasions. And this company right here, it's a training company, industrial training company in Africa and the Middle East. And they put me onto this right here. That was the Abu Dhabi International Petroleum Exhibition and Conference. Here's the pump guy. And that's a pump guy on safari in Africa. Lectures in Durban and Johannesburg. And there again. And here's a lecture in Durban, South Africa, and the room filled right there. And yeah, there I am teaching a class. And right here, same clothes. I'm wearing my ceremonial uniform right now. This was a special occasion for me. This was at the hospital in Cape Town, where Dr. Christian Bernard performed the world's first heart transplant. And this was the maintenance staff. They did the air conditioning and the heating and the water and made sure that everything was working right behind the walls. I gave this lecture to them. And Lesotho in Southern Africa. And here's a Secunda, South Africa. This was a lecture to some 90 people here. And the Nigerian Society of Chemical Engineers in Ghana and Windhoek, Namibia. They have no water in Namibia. They have 2 deserts, the Namib Desert and the Kalahari Desert. So you will flush the commode today and in about 3 days, you'll drink it. All of it. No gray water, it's totally recycled. My UAB education has accompanied me through all the professional incarnations: broadcasting, business, economics, inventing, writing, public speaking. I'm not the only student of Dr. Gaston-Hollis to make the use of the second language. There were many pre-med students in my classes. They had been accepted to medical schools in Latin America, and many of them graduated and joined Doctors Without Borders. And then there was Susan Stucker, and she was there with me. She taught high school Spanish. She won the Millikan Education Award, graduated from right here at UAB. Kentucky Teacher of the Year, National Educator of the Year, went to the White House to meet the president, got a check for $50,000, something like that, and she retired teaching English as a second language to Navajo and Latino students in Arizona, and she's now retired. And that's the end of that. And so, that's what I've done with my education from UAB and Dr. Juanes, and it's been a pleasure, and I know we have to continue with other things, but I'll stay around if there's a question. If you want to consult me about my wardrobe or something, be glad to talk and speak Spanish if you want to.